Those guys are heathens.
Yeah.
Those guys are animalistic heathens.
Yeah, they're holding the jungle back, Tiger.
Jungle? No.
Yes, sir.
I think the defendants are jungle people.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty of the crime of assault by force likely to produce great bodily injury and with a deadly weapon.
1992, a year when America's temper boiled over. 92 would be a year of political change, the end of an era of a comedy giant. Come on, come on! And when our soda taste would go clear. We're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 90s. This is Timeline. Don't worry, we've got you. This video is all about 1992. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what you were doing in 1992. Now, are you ready for 92?
Stay right where you are.
This is 1992.
That is so degrading to women.
What do you mean? She's got the whip.
We start the year off with some bad news for women in Orange County, California, as the FDA, or Food and Drug Administration, urged doctors to stop implanting silicone breasts.
I am requesting a moratorium on the further use of all silicone gel breast implants.
Risks, of course, being silicone gel leaking from a ruptured implant, but also the interference with breast cancer screening x-rays and implant hardening. 2 days later, on January 8th, while attending a banquet hosted by Japanese Prime Minister Kiichi Miyazawa, U.S. President George H.W. Bush fainted after vomiting in the Prime Minister's lap. Bush, who was on a 12-day tour of Asia related to trade issues, fainted in his chair between the second and third courses, came to, and then vomited. I always recommend vomiting before your main course. Bush left early, and his wife Barbara gave a speech in his place.
Must have been something he ate.
In late January, the Washington Redskins defeated the Buffalo Bills 37-24. This also made Washington just the fourth NFL team in history, along with the Steelers, Raiders, and 49ers, to win 3 Super Bowls. The Bills, on the other hand, became only the third team in NFL history, along with the Broncos and Vikings, to lose 2 Super Bowls in a row. The next day, former heavyweight champ Mike Tyson was put on trial for the sexual assault of Miss Black Rhode Island, Desiree Washington.
You hurt me, and I was big enough to stand up to you and tell you need help.
2 weeks later, on February 10th, after 10 hours of deliberation, Tyson was found guilty. The verdict was appealed by Tyson's attorney, Alan Dershowitz of all people, but they lost that. Tyson was sentenced to 6 years in prison and was released in March of 1995 after serving only 3 years.
I have absolutely no thoughts about Mike Tyson. He's finished.
And finally, in January, sports broadcasting legend Howard Cosell announced his retirement. Cosell began his broadcasting career hosting a show about Little League Baseball in New York for ABC. By the early 1960s, Howard was covering boxer Muhammad Ali.
And just have a little dance like we're boxing, and just for 1 second, I have to time it, and for 1 second.
And was probably most famous as he went to announce 14 seasons of ABC's Monday Night Football. And it was in that capacity when on December 8th, 1980, Cosell stunned the world, announcing John Lennon had been assassinated.
An unspeakable tragedy. John Lennon shot twice in the back, dead on arrival.
Sticking with sports, on February 8th, the Winter Olympics began in Albertville, France. Marking the last time the Winter and Summer Games were held in the same calendar year, these games featured over 1,800 athletes from 64 countries. This set of games featured several new events, including free skating, short track speed skating, and women's biathlon. 2 days later, author Alex Haley, responsible for works like Roots, died. Born on August 11, 1921 in Ithaca, New York, Haley, who graduated high school at only 15, dropped out of college in 1939 and enlisted in the military. He would serve in the Coast Guard for 20 years.
Do you still like to ride on the water?
Oh, I do. I go on cargo ships, is what you're talking about. And I go because it's the best isolation I know in this world. I was 20 years in the Coast Guard, so I love the sea and I love ships.
He retired in 1959 to pursue writing. Haley is credited as the creator of Playboy Interview, first published in September of 1962. Haley interviewed Martin Luther King Jr., Sammy Davis Jr., and Quincy Jones, among others. One of these interviews even formed the basis for the autobiography of Malcolm X, which was published to great acclaim in 1965. In mid-February, in a Wisconsin courthouse, the notorious man-eater killer Jeffrey Dahmer was convicted and sentenced to 15 terms of life imprisonment.
Eddie's gone. the victim of your senseless killing. Where do we go from here?
You took my mother's oldest grandchild from her. And for that, I can never forgive you.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey! Jeffrey! I hate you, motherfucker! I hate you!
This has never been a case of trying to get free. I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself.
Dahmer would spend his first year of incarceration in solitary confinement for his own protection. After being transferred to a less secure unit, he became a born-again Christian. That didn't last long because just a little over 2 years later, on November 28, 1994, Dahmer, who left his cell for work detail, was assaulted by fellow inmates with a metal bar. Dahmer died a day later. On February 27th, a 16-year-old sports prodigy named Tiger Woods made his PGA debut at the Nissan Los Angeles Open in California.
Love the competition. I love competing against other players, especially when they're better than me.
Woods, the youngest player to compete in the PGA in 30 years, failed to make the cut, but he was still named Golf Digest Amateur Player of the Year. We may hear more from Tiger later on this decade.
Confessions.
Eavesdrop on real people telling their innermost secrets.
I'm afraid my husband will find out.
Darkest desires.
The safe was left unlocked today.
$2 per minute. Secrets that have to be told.
On March 6th, the Michelangelo computer virus struck.
Computer users won't be joining in all the celebrations for Michelangelo's birthday this Friday because on that day, a new and deadly virus is scheduled to strike computers around the world.
Once a system was infected with the virus, it would copy itself onto any floppy disk the computer was commanded to write on, which made the virus easy to spread by accident. Complicating matters was the fact that a computer could be secretly infected for years, as long as it wasn't booted on that particular date. Experts got in the habit of advising users not to boot their computers on March 6th, and by 1997, no further cases were reported.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
Your Honor.
Can you answer the question?
No, it is a trick question.
Why is it a trick question?
Because Chevy didn't make a 327 in 55, and it wasn't offered in the Bel Air with a 4-barrel carb till 64.
Actually, Miss Stafford is the voice of Woody Woodpecker. But this is the wonderful voice of Woody Woodpecker.
Oh, I want to hear that voice.
Would you?
On March 17th, voice actor Grace Stafford, who voiced Woody Woodpecker, died. While Woody was originally voiced by animation legend Mel Blanc, legal troubles between him and producer Walter Lantz led to the part being recast. Stafford, professional actress who also happened to be Walter Lantz's wife, offered to take the role, but she was turned down because the character was male. Not to be deterred, Stafford recorded an audition tape and sent it in anonymously. Lantz loved the unknown actor and chose them for the role. Oh, hey, it's you, my wife. In late March, on a local New York's Sunday edition, Democratic presidential candidate Bill Clinton admitted to having experimented with marijuana as a teenager. When asked whether he had ever broken a state or an international law regarding drugs, Clinton responded,
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
And the Oscar goes to The Silence of the Lambs.
On March 30th, Silence of the Lambs took home all of the top honors at the 64th Academy Awards. Not only did it win Best Picture, but also won Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. It was only the third time in history that a single film swept all of the so-called Big Five Academy Awards. Silence of the Lambs was also the first horror film to ever win the big prize, and is notable as the first movie to be released on home video prior to winning Best Picture. Heading into April, John Gotti, the Teflon Don of New York's Gambino crime family, was convicted of 5 murders, including the assassination of his predecessor, Paul Castellano.
This time, the charges stick, and the Teflon Don may now spend the rest of his life in prison. John Gotti, guilty on all counts.
The government's star witness, Gotti's former right-hand man, who turned rat, Sammy the Bull Gravano. The 51-year-old Gotti was also convicted on a slew of other counts, including murder conspiracy, gambling, loan sharking, and obstruction of justice. Fast forward to a decade later when Gotti would die in prison of cancer. The Don was only 61. 4 days later, iconic science fiction author Isaac Asimov, who authored over 375 books, died. Born in Petrovichi, Russia, Asimov came to the United States in 1923, growing up in Brooklyn. Asimov's books included I, Robot, Fantastic Voyage, and the Foundation trilogy. Asimov was considered one of the big three of science fiction, along with Arthur C. Clarke and Robert Heinlein. On April 10th, the comedy world lost a legend when stand-up Sam Kinison died in a head-on car collision while on his way to a gig in Nevada. The 38-year-old comic was actually a former Pentecostal preacher before he started performing as a comedian. Kinison, popular for his trademark, quickly moved up from playing small comedy clubs to appearing on late-night TV to memorable roles in films like Rodney Dangerfield's Back to School. In mid-April, consumers showed up at supermarkets to a novel sight, Crystal Pepsi. Although technically it wasn't the first clear cola, the product was sold saying, "You've never seen a taste like this," and even used Van Hagar's song Right Now in their commercials. In its first year, Crystal Pepsi had sold nearly $500 million worth of soda. However, Pepsi's nemesis, the Coca-Cola Company, quickly followed up with their own concoction.
Tab Clear. Suddenly, everything is clear.
Executives would later admit that Tab Clear was made to specifically dupe consumers into thinking that Crystal Pepsi was a diet drink. The sabotage was a success. As we fast forward to 1993, Crystal Pepsi would be pulled off the market. But Crystal Pepsi lovers rejoice. The clear beverage has been revived on limited occasions since.
We're finally ready to relaunch Crystal Pepsi.
On April 22nd at 11:30 a.m., dozens of sewers in Guadalajara, Mexico exploded. More than 200 people were killed and over 1,000 buildings were damaged. The explosion was caused by a gas leak, which had already been evident to both the Mexican government and the National Oil Company. Residents of Guadalajara had reported a foul smell in the air, a stinging in their throats and noses, and bouts of nausea. No real investigation was undertaken. 20 square blocks of Guadalajara were destroyed, and craters 200 feet deep opened in 2 separate locations.
Ragu introduces Chicken Tonight Simmer Sauces, and suddenly everybody's saying,
I feel like chicken tonight, like chicken tonight.
Just brown the chicken, simmer, and serve.
I feel like chicken tonight, like chicken tonight.
We go to Simi Valley, California, where police officers Stacy Kuhn, Lawrence Powell, Timothy Wind, and Theodore Brasino were put on trial for the beating of Rodney King. Just 2 weeks later, the prosecution would rest its case. The jury reached a verdict, finding all 4 officers not guilty. The verdict did not go over well.
This is the President's Valley.
You got a plane ticket, cashed it in, and get the heck out of Dodge. This is going to be a bad place to live.
Massive rioting broke out in and around Los Angeles.
I knew when they moved the whole case to Simi Valley or whatever, some stuff was really going to go down.
Nothing that has happened to Rodney King is new.
In the past, been trying to settle matters like this with like non-violent, right? They ain't getting nowhere, so the only way you can do it is with violence.
Can't take no more.
The next 6 days were marked by looting, arson, and assaults, which were only stopped by the intervention of the California National Guard and the U.S. military.
Go home! Get back home! Go!
By the time it was over, 63 people were dead, over 2,300 were injured, and more than 12,000 were under arrest. Property damage estimates were later placed at well over $1 billion.
You call this black power? You mad the white man? Why you doing my business? I'm trying to make it.
2 of the 4 officers would later be found guilty of federal civil rights violations, and King would be awarded $3.8 million in a civil suit against the officers. Heading into May, Rodney King himself made his first statement to the media. In front of a crowd of reporters, King pleaded for an end to the violence with the now famous,
Can we all get along?
On May 11th, Carlos Herrera, the inventor of the margarita, died. According to his relatives, Herrera first invented the drink at Rancho La Gloria, a restaurant he opened just south of Tijuana in 1935. A few years later, he first mixed white tequila with lemon juice, shaved ice, triple sec, and salt. In mid-May, we go to Long Island, New York, where Mary Jo Buttafuoco was shot by Amy Fisher. Fisher, as it turns out, was having an affair with Mary Jo Buttafuoco's husband, Joey Buttafuoco, who she met the year before at Buttafuoco's auto shop. Pretending to be her own fictional sister Anne Marie, Fisher came to the house to confront Mary Jo about the affair. Mary Jo Buttafuoco asked Fisher to leave. Fisher responded by shooting her in the face. While Mary Jo Buttafuoco was deafened in one ear and her face was partially paralyzed, she survived. Fisher was eventually sentenced to 15 years in prison, of which she served 8 before being paroled. But a Foucault!
This is the true story. True story.
7 strangers picked to live in a loft
and have their lives taped
and start getting real.
The real world.
It would be on May 22nd, where late night would be the end of an era when Johnny Carson, host of The Tonight Show, said goodbye in a farewell episode. Carson took over the show from Jack Paar in 1962. Some of the famous faces that appeared included John Wayne, Richard Nixon, Elizabeth Taylor, Orson Welles, and Ella Fitzgerald.
And I hope when I find something that I want to do and I think you will like and come back, that you'll be as gracious in inviting me into your home as you have been. I bid you a very heartfelt good night.
On June 2nd, 1992, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton clinched the Democratic nomination for President of the United States when he won the California Democratic primary.
This election is about putting power back in your hands.
While this win officially won the primary for him, the writing had long been on the wall. As early as March 20th, the New York Times had observed that the withdrawal of Senator Paul Tsongas of Massachusetts gave Clinton a clear path to the nomination. On June 14th, Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls defeated the Portland Trail Blazers to win their 2nd consecutive NBA championship.
Chicago Bulls have won the NBA championship for the 2nd straight season.
Patrons on Chicago's Division Street put down the kielbasa, taking the streets to dance and celebrate. But things quickly got out of hand. 2 taxicabs were overturned, and a wave of violence swept through the neighborhoods on the city's south and west sides. Over 200 civilians and nearly 100 police officers were injured in the ensuing celebrations. In mid-June, Vice President Diane Quayle was conducting a spelling bee during a visit to a school in New Jersey when a 12-year-old, William Figueroa, wrote the word potato on the board. Quayle jumped in to correct the boy based on an inaccurate flashcard prepared by the teacher, telling the boy the word was supposed to have an E on the end of it. The story would become a late-night talk show punchline for years afterwards. On June 28th, medical history was made when a 35-year-old man received a baboon liver in the first transplant of its kind. The 11-hour operation was performed by doctors at the University of Pittsburgh's Presbyterian University Hospital. The unnamed patient ultimately died 70 days after the surgery, but the operation did prove the effectiveness of an experimental immunosuppressant drug. On June 29th, Algerian President Mohamed Boudiaf was assassinated in the city of Annaba. The assassin would turn out to be one of the president's own bodyguards, Lieutenant Lamarek Bouma Arafi, a religious extremist who is believed to have acted alone. Bouma Arafi was sentenced to death 3 years after the shooting. The sentence was never carried out. He remains in prison to this day. On July 22nd, at age 51, Wayne McLaren, better known as the Marlboro Man, succumbed to lung cancer. McLaren, who had a pack and a half a day smoking habit, had been diagnosed with the disease just 2 years earlier. After learning of his diagnosis, McLaren embarked on an anti-smoking campaign, which included powerful commercials that showed him in his hospital bed just prior to his death.
The tobacco industry used my brother in ads to create an image that smoking makes you independent. Lying there with all those tubes in you, how independent can you really be?
Just hold it right there. Hold it! You just shot an unarmed man.
Well, he should have armed himself. He's gonna decorate his saloon with my friend.
On August 8th, the U.S. men's national basketball team, more famously known as the Dream Team, crushed the Croatian team 117-85 in Barcelona, Spain. The team roster, which included 11 Hall of Famers, including Jordan, Magic, Bird, Barkley, Patrick Ewing, Karl Malone, John Stockton, Clyde Drexler, David Robinson, Scottie Pippen, Chris Mullin, and Christian Laettner. Well, that last one may not be so impressive. The win would clinch a perfect 8-0 record for the team and annihilated all of their opponents by an average of 43.8 points per game.
Sunday, the country's hot with Clint Black, Kathy Mattea, Travis Tritt, and the Kentucky Headhunters. A spectacular new Hot Country Nights, NBC Sunday.
Civilization has not been the same since the first shopping mall opened in America. Is the age of the mall the beginning or the end of civilization as we know it?
The $625 million Mall of America officially opened in Bloomington, Minnesota. Occupying nearly 80 acres, the mall included nearly 300 stores, restaurants, and bars, as well as Knott's Camp Snoopy theme park, which was the mall's centerpiece. First proposed in 1978, construction on the complex didn't begin until 1989. Officials estimated that over 150,000 people toured the mall on its first day. Over 20,000 visited the theme park, and the complex's 13,000 parking spots were full throughout.
Hey, listen, you're not going to do Arsenio or Leno, are you?
I've got to. Hey, it's a business. Get used to it. Blow me.
On August 17th, famed writer, director, and comedian Woody Allen publicly announced that he was in a relationship with Soon-Yi Previn, the adopted daughter of composer Andre Previn and Allen's ex-girlfriend, Mia Farrow.
In a written statement, Allen says, "Regarding my love for Soon-Yi, it's real and happily all true."
It later came to light that Allen was in possession of nude Polaroids of Soon-Yi, and allegations later emerged that he had sexually abused Farrow's daughter, Dylan. On August 21st, U.S. Marshals looking to apprehend white separatist Randall Weaver for his failure to appear in court on firearms charges began surveillance on his property located at Ruby Ridge in northwest Idaho. Marshals encountered Weaver's 14-year-old son Randy, who was in the woods at the time with a family friend. A shootout erupted, and it would ultimately take the lives of Sammy Weaver, as well as one of the marshals. The events would prompt an 11-day standoff. Weaver and Harris would face federal criminal charges, including first-degree murder, but they were acquitted of all of them, except the original bail violation and gun charge faced by Weaver. On August 24th, Category 5 Hurricane Andrew struck the Bahamas, Florida, and Louisiana. The storm remains the single most destructive hurricane in terms of property damage to ever strike Florida. The hurricane ultimately did what in today's terms would amount to over $100 billion worth of damage. In late August, Arthur Lee Allen, long suspected to be the Zodiac Killer, died at the age of 58 in his Vallejo, California home. Allen, who was the subject of Robert Graysmith's 1986 best-selling book Zodiac, had been a suspect since the earliest days of the investigation. With only circumstantial evidence, police couldn't definitively tie Allen to any of the crimes. In 2002, a partial DNA profile developed from the saliva on the stamps and envelopes of Zodiac Killer's letters didn't match Allen's DNA. Police handwriting experts were unable to match any sample of Allen's writing to the Zodiac's letters. In 2010, a former lead detective on the case stated that all evidence against Allen had turned out to be negative. On September 7th, Fay Vincent, commissioner of Major League Baseball since 1989, resigned his position. Vincent, who was not popular with team owners due to his perceived favoritism toward the players' union during the previous year's lockout, had recently lost a no-confidence vote by a margin of 18-9. Ultimately, the owners gave the job to Milwaukee Brewers owner Bud Selig, who had been occupying the job as acting commissioner since Vincent had departed. On September 12th, Jan Davis and Mark Lee became the first married couple to go into space together. Traveling aboard the Shuttle Endeavour, the couple was also accompanied by Mae Jemison, who became the first African-American woman to fly in space, and Mamoru Mori, 44, who became the first Japanese citizen to fly on an American spacecraft. However, while the mission was a success, Davis and Lee would divorce in 1998.
Wow! A whole channel of nothing but cartoons.
Yes, I do think you're handsome.
On October 3rd, singer Sinead O'Connor appeared on Saturday Night Live as the musical guest. O'Connor sang an a cappella version of Bob Marley's War, in which she changed the lyric to mention child abuse, intended to draw attention to the Roman Catholic Church. While singing the word evil, O'Connor held up a photo of Pope John Paul II. Then she tore the photo, saying,
"Fight the real enemy."
Network executives banned O'Connor from the show. On the very same day, Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, became the youngest person to top the Forbes 400 list of richest Americans. The 36-year-old college dropout was listed as having a net worth of $6.3 billion, which topped telecom magnate John W. Kluge, who had held the list's top spot for the previous 3 years. Gates would occupy the top spot on the list until 2018, when he was surpassed by Amazon's Jeff Bezos.
Let me just get this straight. You don't ever tip, huh?
I don't tip because society says I have to. All right, I mean, I'll tip if somebody really deserves a tip. If they really put forth the effort, I'll give them something extra. But I mean, this tipping automatically, it's for the birds.
Question is, can I get Wolverine before he turns me into shish kebab with those claws? Well, Bob, seeing as how these claws are adamantium, you gotta ask yourself, do I feel lucky?
On November 3rd, Democratic presidential candidate Bill Clinton became president-elect as he defeated incumbent President George H.W. Bush.
The American people have voted to make a new beginning.
Clinton won by over 5 million votes and 202 electoral votes. He also beat independent candidate H. Ross Perot, who won 20 million votes, nearly 19% of the entire vote, the highest percentage of any third-party candidate in 80 years.
You didn't hear the sergeant? Outside.
I suggest you look outside that window. Well, until I'm satisfied that Brother Johnson is receiving proper medical care, nobody will move.
In mid-December, the North American Free Trade Agreement, better known as NAFTA, was signed into law by the administrations of the U.S. President George H.W. Bush, Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, and Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari. The agreement, among other things, called for the gradual reduction of duties, tariffs, and other trade barriers between the three nations. It also secured intellectual property rights and established strict measures to be taken against industrial theft. And finally, on December 27th, crooner Harry Connick Jr. was arrested at New York's Kennedy Airport after a handgun was found in his carry-on bag. The 24-year-old singer was taken to a police station in Queens, where he was charged with fourth-degree possession of a weapon, which is a misdemeanor in New York. According to Connick, the gun had been a gift, and he had been misinformed about the state's gun laws. Satisfied he had no criminal intent, the charges against the singer were ultimately dismissed. And that's how 1992 ended. 1993 was just days away. It would be a year where a cult would catch fire, a Black Hawk would go down, and a basketball legend would call it quits. But that is for next year. You're just gonna have to find a way to pass the time.
You got a joint?
Coming soon, 1993. All right, all right, all right.